She handed Keanu Reeves his coffee like always, except this time her sleeve slipped just enough to reveal a fading bruise. He didn't say a word, not yet. But what he uncovered next would expose a secret so disturbing it would shake the entire company and force Keanu to make an unthinkable choice. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The morning air on set carried a calm stillness, the kind that settles just before the hustle begins. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his trailer reviewing lines for an emotionally intense scene scheduled that afternoon. He wore his usual faded black hoodie and jeans, his hair tied back loosely, reading with quiet concentration when the knock came. It was Maya Torres, his assistant of nearly 3 years. She stepped inside with her usual grace, holding a paper cup in her hand. His coffee just the way he liked it, with a touch of almond milk and no sugar. Maya, 28, always carried herself with an air of calm professionalism. Nothing ever seemed to rattle her. She had been by Keanu's side across multiple projects, quietly managing schedules, handling logistics, shielding him from unnecessary chaos. He had grown to admire her steady presence and her quiet resilience. "Morning, Keanu," she said, offering the cup with a small smile. "Thanks, Maya," he replied, his voice soft. As he reached for the cup, something caught his eye. Her sleeve rode up slightly as she extended her arm. It wasn't much, just a sliver of pale skin marked by a faint yellowing bruise on her wrist, the kind of bruise that looked like it had been deeper, darker a few days ago. Keanu froze just for a breath. Then he gently took the cup and looked at her face. Maya quickly tugged her sleeve down, her smile never faltering, but her eyes, those gave something away. Not fear, exactly, but an alertness, a flash of guardedness, as if she knew he had seen and was already preparing an excuse. "You okay?" Keanu asked casually, keeping his tone light. "Oh yeah," she said quickly, brushing her hand through her dark brown hair. "I just bumped into a cabinet the other night. Total klutz move." He nodded slowly, but something inside him didn't settle. He'd seen bruises like that before. Too clean, too deliberate in shape to be from a random accident. But Maya had already moved on, adjusting his call sheet on the tablet, changing the subject smoothly. They spoke a few more minutes about the day's schedule. Maya was efficient as always. Nothing seemed out of place on the surface. But as she turned to leave, Keanu watched the way she moved. There was a slight limp in her step, almost unnoticeable. He hadn't seen it before. And now, he couldn't unsee it. Something was off. He stayed seated for a long time after she left the coffee, untouched in his hand. The lines he had been rehearsing sat open in the script on his lap, but he couldn't bring himself to focus on them. His thoughts were elsewhere, on a bruise, a limp, and the quiet look in Maya's eyes that didn't match her words. He told himself maybe it really was nothing, but his gut was already telling him the truth. Something was wrong, and it was time to start paying attention. The following day, the atmosphere on set was more charged than usual. The production had fallen behind schedule after a camera malfunction the night before, and tensions were rising. Keanu stayed grounded, as he always did, offering calm wherever possible. But even in the chaos, his eyes kept drifting toward Maya. She moved with her usual purpose, clipboard in hand, headset over her shoulder, checking off tasks as the crew scrambled to reset equipment. To the casual observer, she was the same efficient professional she'd always been, but Keanu had spent enough time with her to notice the changes now. She winced slightly when one of the producers raised his voice across the room. Just a small flinch, but it was there. When someone dropped a metal case behind her, the crash made her jump more than it should have. She tried to laugh it off, but her hands trembled when she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. During lunch break, she sat alone at the far edge of the lot, instead of joining the usual assistant group. Keanu watched from a distance, pretending to study a prop. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't eating. She just sat there, hunched over, staring into the distance. Her expression was hollow. Later that afternoon, Keanu approached one of the makeup artists, a warm woman named Gina, who'd worked with both of them for months. "Hey," he asked quietly, Have you noticed anything different about Maya lately? Gina glanced around, then lowered her voice. She's been quieter, yeah. Hasn't said much all week. Thought she might be tired or sick or something. But now that you mention it, she didn't laugh at Dan's stupid raccoon story yesterday. She always laughs at that. Keanu offered a faint smile, but didn't answer. Back in his trailer, he thought through the past few weeks, how Maya had stopped mentioning her boyfriend Nathan. She used to talk about him often, silly little stories, inside jokes, comments about their shared dog. But lately, nothing. No texts between takes, no casual updates, just silence. He remembered the bandage she'd had on her elbow last week. She said she'd tripped over a stair. Before that, it had been a cut near her hairline. Ran into a cabinet door, she had said. 1 injury maybe, 2 possibly. But now it was 3. And that limp, and the flinch, and the silence. Keanu's chest tightened. Still, he didn't want to leap to conclusions. Maya was private. He respected that. But he also knew what it meant when someone started shrinking inward, when their smiles became rehearsed and their stories stopped altogether. This wasn't just exhaustion, this was fear. He wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. But from that moment on, he made a quiet promise to himself. He would watch closer, listen harder. And if the pattern continued, he wouldn't stay silent. The next morning, rain drizzled across the studio lot. Crew members shuffled in with umbrellas and jackets, grumbling about delays and soaked equipment. Keanu arrived early, sipping a plain coffee and scanning the misty set. Maya wasn't there yet. That was rare. She was always early, always prepared, always standing by with her clipboard, her headset, and that calm, capable look in her eyes. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Keanu grew restless, pretending to read the day's script revisions while watching the parking lot from the trailer window. Finally, her small gray sedan rolled in, tires splashing through shallow puddles. When Maya stepped out, she moved stiffly. Her hoodie hung oddly around her shoulders, like she was hiding something beneath it. She avoided eye contact with the crew, walked with her head low. When she reached the wardrobe tent to drop off some call sheets, Keanu caught the quick wince she tried to suppress while lifting a box. He walked over casually. "Morning," he said. She glanced up, forcing a small smile. "Hey, sorry I'm late. Traffic was bad." He nodded. "All good. You all right?" Her pause was just long enough to confirm everything he feared. "Yeah, just tired. Haven't been sleeping well." She looked away quickly. A drop of water slid down her cheek, rain or something else, he couldn't be sure. He let the silence hang for a moment. "If you ever need anything," he said softly, "I mean anything, you can tell me. No judgment." Her jaw tensed. She nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "I'm fine. Really," she said. "Thanks though, Keanu." He wanted to believe her, but he couldn't. Later that day, he asked the security guard at the gate, an older man named Franklin, who'd worked the front lot for years, if he'd seen anything unusual with Maya lately. Franklin hesitated, then rubbed the back of his neck. "She's been coming in earlier than normal. Leaving later, too. Last couple nights, she was the last car out, almost midnight. Looked kind of shaky. Thought maybe she was stressed about the shoot." Keanu's heart sank. That night, while reviewing a scene cut with the director, he couldn't concentrate. Maya's flinch, her limp, the way she pulled her hoodie sleeves down even in the warm trailer. He kept replaying it all like pieces of a puzzle, forming a picture no one wanted to admit was real. By the time the day ended, Keanu had made a quiet decision. He wasn't going to force her to talk, not yet, but he would keep watching. He would protect her even if she didn't know it yet. And if this went any further, if the bruises kept showing up and the silence got louder, he would not look the other way. He had seen too much pain in the world to ignore it when it stood right beside him. Keanu waited for the right moment. The days had grown heavier with silence. Maya still showed up early. She still completed every task, smiled when spoken to, and kept things moving behind the scenes. But now Keanu saw through it all. He could see how carefully she was holding herself together, like a glass just beginning to crack under pressure. It was late one evening when he made the decision. Most of the crew had already left. Rain tapped softly on the rooftop of the old sound stage where they had been filming a night scene. Keanu asked Maya to meet him near the back lot, away from the cameras and trailers, where the only sounds were the soft hum of the lights and the distant clatter of leftover equipment being packed away. She arrived holding her tablet, thinking it was about tomorrow's call sheet. He waved it off. "No work stuff," Keanu said gently. Just us." Maya looked at him puzzled, then concerned. He gestured toward a bench near the edge of the lot beneath a canopy of light. They sat down, the space between them quiet, the air damp and still. He didn't start with a question, just a pause. Then he said, "You don't have to say anything, but if you're in trouble, I'm here." Her expression didn't change at first. She blinked, looked down at her hands, smiled faintly. "I'm fine," she said. Keanu nodded slowly. "Okay." She started to stand. "Thank you, but really, I'm just tired. I know I've seemed off. It's just—" She trailed off. Her voice cracked. She sat back down. For a moment, they said nothing. Then a tear slid down her cheek. She turned her head, quickly wiped it away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't have to be," Keanu said. She pressed her fingers to her eyes, then gave up trying to hold it in. The tears came harder now, one after another, and her voice broke as she spoke. "It's Travis," she said. Keanu didn't move, just listened. She drew in a shaky breath. It started small, controlling things, what I wore, who I texted. He'd get jealous if I was too friendly with anyone at work. He didn't want me talking to my sister anymore, said she filled my head with nonsense. Her hands were shaking. Then it turned into pushing, shoving. At first, he said he was sorry every time, that he loved me, that he just lost control. Keanu stayed quiet. "But it got worse," Maya continued. "Last month he slapped me, then again last week. After that, I stopped fighting back. I just tried to stay out of his way." Her voice went flat. "He said if I ever left, he'd find me." Keanu took a slow breath and sat forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. The weight of her words hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. He didn't interrupt her, didn't try to fix it with platitudes. He just let her speak. "I thought I could handle it," Maya said, her voice hoarse. "I kept telling myself it was temporary, that he was just going through something, that if I didn't push him, if I stayed calm, he'd stop." She laughed bitterly under her breath, but it didn't stop. It got darker. "And now I don't even recognize myself. I haven't called my parents in weeks. I haven't been home in 2 days. I've been sleeping in my car between shifts, just trying to stay away." Keanu turned his head to look at her. "I'm sorry, Maya." She nodded, still wiping at her face. "I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want to be that person, the one who let it happen. But I'm scared, Keanu. I'm so scared." His voice was calm, steady. "You didn't let anything happen. Abuse isn't your fault, and you're not alone anymore." She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Keanu pulled a small object from his coat pocket and held it out to her. It was a simple phone, the kind you'd find at a convenience store. A burner. No ties to her name, no link to her personal number. "You can use this for anything. No one will trace it. No one but you has the number." She hesitated, then took it with shaking fingers. "There's also someone I want you to call. Her name's Evelyn. She works with women going through what you're going through. She doesn't report anything. She just helps. Quietly. Safely." Maya held the phone like it was a lifeline. "I don't want to get anyone in trouble," she said quietly. I don't know what to do." "You don't have to know right now," Keanu said. "You don't have to decide anything tonight, but you don't have to go through this alone. Not anymore." For the first time, Maya let her shoulders drop. It wasn't relief exactly, more like exhaustion. A crack in the wall she had built, letting some of the fear and shame leak out. Keanu didn't offer promises he couldn't keep. He didn't say everything would magically be okay. But his presence, his calm, and his unwavering kindness did something that Maya hadn't felt in a long time. It made her feel safe. They sat in silence for a few minutes after that, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Maya looked down at the phone in her hand. Her thumb brushed over the keypad, then rested on the blank screen. She didn't turn it on yet. I used to think I was strong, she said softly. I thought I could handle anything. I've always been that person, the fixer, the quiet problem solver. But I couldn't fix him, and I hate that I waited this long to admit I couldn't. Keanu leaned back, his voice still gentle. Being strong doesn't mean staying silent. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is speak up, or ask for help, or just tell the truth. Maya nodded, slowly, then wiped her cheeks with her sleeve and gave a quiet laugh. You're supposed to be the one who needs support on these shoots, she said. Not the other way around, he smiled faintly. We all need support. No one gets through life alone, and if I can't be someone you can trust, then I don't deserve the kind of loyalty you've given me all these years. Her eyes welled again at that. Keanu stood, hands in his pockets, but he didn't walk away. You don't have to decide anything tonight, but when you're ready, Evelyn will be too. I've known her for years. She's helped people I care about. Maya looked up. Why are you doing this? He shrugged lightly. Because I care. And because I know what it's like to live with pain you don't talk about. She stood more grounded now than she had been minutes before. She slipped the small phone into her jacket pocket, zipped it shut, and gave a short nod. I don't know what I'll do yet, she said, but I promise I won't ignore it anymore. That's enough, Keanu replied. You don't have to know everything right now. Just keep walking toward better. One step at a time. They didn't hug, they didn't say goodbye, but something passed between them in that moment. A shift, a shared understanding that the silence had broken and healing could begin. As Maya walked back toward her car, her steps were still slow, but they were steadier, not free of fear, but no longer crushed by it. And Keanu stayed behind in the quiet lot, hands still in his pockets, watching the streetlights blink in the distance. He knew this wasn't over, but now she wasn't facing it alone. The next morning, Keanu arrived early on set. Not because he had an early call time, but because Maya did. He wanted to be present, just quietly nearby. When she stepped out of her car and gave him a tired smile, he nodded in greeting, then casually walked beside her toward the trailers. They didn't need to speak much. Trust had already begun growing in the silence. Later that afternoon, between scenes, they sat again in the same small corner of the lot, behind a stack of unused lighting gear. Maya looked more composed, but something in her eyes had shifted. There was a weight she seemed ready to share. She started slowly, her voice quiet. I wasn't always like this. Scared, hiding. There was a time when I had a life. I went to CalArts for design, top of my class. I had a thesis project on sustainable fashion that was picked up by a startup in Portland. I thought my future was lined with color and purpose. Keanu listened, eyes steady, giving her space to continue. I wanted to start a nonprofit, she said, one that used recycled textiles to employ single mothers and women coming out of prison. I had this whole plan, funding proposals, of community partners lined up, even a logo. She smiled faintly at the memory, but it didn't reach her eyes. And then I met Travis. Keanu stayed silent. It was at a gala for a local arts fund. He was a donor. Polished, charming, said all the right things. I felt seen, you know. Like finally someone noticed me. He asked questions about my dreams, my plans, made me feel like I wasn't alone. She looked down at her hands. It was fast. We moved in together 3 months later. I started relying on him. At first it was just suggestions. Maybe I shouldn't work so late. Maybe this person wasn't a good influence. But then it became control. He didn't want me meeting with partners alone. Said men only helped me because they wanted something else. Keanu frowned just slightly. I pushed back once, she said. He got quiet. That silence, it was worse than yelling. He disappeared for 2 days. I thought he'd left. When he came back, he was cold. He told me I was lucky. He hadn't exposed my insecurities to the board. Said he'd been covering for my anxiety, that no one else would be patient enough. The words came faster now, like a dam opening. I tried to leave. I did. I packed a bag, booked a room at a friend's house. But Travis showed up at my old job the next morning, told them I was unstable, that I had outbursts, that I was emotionally manipulative. He even forged an email claiming I threatened him. Keanu's jaw tightened. Maya's voice cracked. They revoked my offer. That was the last job I had before you. I thought getting the job with you would be a new start, Maya continued. Fresh city, new people. I told myself this time I'd be smart. Careful. I never even mentioned Travis on my application. Keanu nodded slowly. You've done everything right. None of this is your fault. She gave him a grateful glance, but her hands were still trembling. Things were good at first, she said. You're kind. And the crew was welcoming. I started smiling again. Sleeping. I stopped jumping every time my phone buzzed. Keanu remained still, not interrupting, only listening with that steady, quiet presence Maya had come to rely on. But then she said, swallowing, he found me. I don't know how. Maybe through my LinkedIn, maybe a friend slipped up. One day, I came back from lunch and found a rose on my windshield. No note, just the rose. Keanu's expression shifted just slightly. He said nothing, but inside something began to burn. Maya looked away. The next week, he sent a message. During your rehearsal, actually, said he missed me, that he was glad I still looked good under pressure. He knew what I'd been doing that day. That scared me more than anything. Keanu's voice was calm but firm. Did he threaten you directly? He doesn't have to, she whispered. It's the way he says things, what he implies. He said, it'd be a shame if people here knew the real Maya. That I could lose this too. There was a long silence. Keanu's eyes never left hers. He showed up near set once, she admitted. Far enough to not get noticed, but I saw him, leaning on a car, watching. He waved when I looked over, like it was a joke. Keanu's jaw clenched. He kept his voice even. Did you tell security I wanted to, but I didn't want to lose the job. I didn't want to seem like drama. You wouldn't, Keanu said simply, but I get it. She looked at him, eyes filled with guilt and exhaustion. I thought if I just stayed quiet, he'd get bored, move on, but he's not letting go. And I've been so afraid to tell you, because this job matters. You're not like anyone I've ever worked for. I didn't want to bring this darkness here. Keanu shook his head. You didn't bring the darkness. You've been surviving it. Maya looked down again, eyes glistening. For the first time in a long time, someone wasn't asking her to be stronger. He was offering to carry the weight beside her, and that changed everything. Keanu leaned back slightly, giving Maya a moment to breathe. Then quietly he spoke. You said once you felt invisible, he said, but I see you, and I believe you. Every word. Maya wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. That means more than you know. He hesitated, then reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small item wrapped in a cloth. He unfolded it gently. It was a compact burner phone already set up. This isn't traceable. It's yours, he said. I put in a direct number for a woman named Dr. Carla Bryant. She's with a private group that helps women in your situation. They don't report unless you want them to. She's safe. I trust her. Maya stared at the phone, stunned. You thought of all this already? I started thinking the moment I saw that bruise, Keanu replied. I didn't know the details, but I knew you were carrying something. I just wanted you to know you're not alone anymore. Maya took the phone in her hands like it was a lifeline. She held it close, then nodded. Thank you. There's no rush, Keanu added. You decide what comes next. Not me, not him, you. She looked up, the first flicker of real strength in her eyes. I'm tired of running, she said, but I don't know if I'm ready to fight either. You don't have to do either today, he said, but you do have the right to heal on your own terms. A deep stillness settled between them, the kind that doesn't need words. Then Keanu leaned forward again. From now on, he said, if he comes near you again, on set, off set, doesn't matter. You tell me, or you tell security, and I promise you it will be handled, quietly, but firmly. Maya nodded, holding the phone tighter. I was always afraid no one would believe me, she said. He's so careful with his image, so charming in public, but behind closed doors... You don't have to convince me, Keanu said. You already did. She exhaled long and slow, as if finally letting go of a breath she'd been holding for years. They sat for a while longer. No rush, no pressure. Just the quiet presence of someone finally being seen and someone quietly refusing to look away. As they stood, Keanu offered one last reassurance. "Whatever happens next," he said, "you're not in this alone. We'll find a way. Together." Maya gave a soft, tearful smile, and for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. 3 days after their quiet conversation, Keanu made a call. Not to the press, not to any publicist, but to someone he trusted deeply, his personal attorney, Marla Jensen. She had been with him through some of the toughest contractual battles of his career, calm, razor-sharp, and deeply discreet. Marla met them in a private office offset, a space Keanu often used for reading scripts or decompressing. But today, it served a different purpose. Maya sat in the corner of the room, her hands folded in her lap. She looked both anxious and resigned, as if she already knew this wouldn't be easy. "Hi," Marla said kindly as she took a seat. "I'm not here to pressure you. I'm here to give you information. You decide if and when anything happens." Maya nodded, but didn't speak. Keanu sat beside her, his presence quiet but grounding. Marla opened a file and began walking them through the legal options: restraining orders, civil protective filings, documentation protocols. She laid it all out without emotion, just facts. Maya listened in silence. Then Keanu introduced the second expert, a man named Roman Devlin, a former FBI agent turned private security consultant. His voice was low, calm, and matter-of-fact. "I work quietly," Roman explained. "No spotlights, no headlines. My job is to protect and anticipate. If we move forward, my team can run a background profile on Travis. We'll know what we're dealing with, but nothing happens unless you give the green light." Maya finally spoke. Her voice was brittle. "What if he finds out Roman met her gaze evenly? Then we'll be ready for him, but we'll move carefully, and we'll make sure you're safe first." She looked down. "I don't want to make things worse." "You're not making anything worse," Keanu said gently. "You're taking your power back." The next step was hard. Maya had to begin gathering evidence. Not for the police yet, not officially, but to build a foundation. Roman handed her a plain envelope. "Inside is a checklist," he said. "Don't worry, it's simple. Photos of any injuries past or recent, screenshots of messages, voice recordings if he ever calls, anything that shows a pattern. We'll catalog it securely. It's not just for court, it's for your protection." Maya nodded, but her hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. Roman leaned forward. "You're not alone in this. You're not overreacting. And you're not weak. You're doing something brave." Keanu watched her carefully. Then he said, "The moment you say go, we move, not before." "You're in control, Maya." She looked up, and for the first time she didn't flinch. Roman laid out the findings, slowly giving Maya space to process. Travis had a past one carefully buried beneath charm and corporate polish. He had worked at 3 companies over the past 8 years. At each, Roman found records of internal complaints. Nothing criminal, nothing that made it to court. But the stories were there, hidden in HR files and whispered warnings. One woman claimed Travis had stalked her after a brief relationship ended. Another reported being threatened at work, but left before an investigation could begin. Roman even tracked down a restraining order filed 5 years ago in a different state. It had expired and been sealed, but Roman's team uncovered a summary. The accusations mirrored Maya's almost exactly. Emotional manipulation, isolation, physical escalation. Maya's hands clenched in her lap. "So it wasn't just me?" she said softly. Keanu leaned forward. "It was never just you." Marla looked over the findings. "This changes things. It builds a clear pattern. Judges look for that when issuing long-term protective orders. It means your case is stronger than you think." But Maya looked shaken. Why didn't anyone stop him before Roman answered gently? Because women are often expected to protect the people who hurt them. And predators like Travis are experts at staying just inside the line of law. Maya closed her eyes. I thought I was just being dramatic. You were being hurt, Keanu said. That's different. They moved quickly now with Maya's cautious permission. The restraining order was drafted and filed under seal to avoid tipping Travis off too early. Roman set up discreet security protocols, tracking devices in Maya's car emergency codes to alert his team and a private safe house if things escalated. Keanu insisted on covering all costs. Maya protested at first, but he met her concern with quiet certainty. This isn't charity, it's justice. The court date was set. A judge would review the evidence and determine if a full protection order could be granted. Roman and Marla prepared Maya for every step, what questions might be asked, how Travis might respond, and what her rights were if he showed up. But Keanu also prepared something else. He arranged for a trauma counselor to meet with Maya twice a week, starting immediately. Not to talk about court, just to help her breathe again, stand again, begin again. For the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to believe she might actually be free. That evening, Maya sat alone in her small apartment. The envelope Roman had given her sat unopened on the kitchen table. Her tea had gone cold hours ago. She kept replaying Travis's voice in her mind, the threats, the apologies, the excuses, the chilling silence that followed when she didn't respond fast enough. She didn't want to relive it, but Keanu's voice echoed too, quiet, steady, you're in control. It gave her just enough courage to move. She peeled the envelope open and pulled out the checklist. It was handwritten in simple, clear language, no legal jargon, just steps. She opened her phone and went back through her saved messages. There were hundreds. Most started sweet, then veered into accusations, then the cruel ones, the ones that made her stomach twist. She began screenshotting them one by one. Then came the voice memos Travis had once left her, a 5-minute voicemail after she didn't answer a call. His voice shifted from charming to furious in under 2 minutes. She downloaded it. Then she did something even harder. She walked to her bathroom mirror, rolled up the sleeve of her hoodie, and gently pressed her phone camera to her arm. The bruise was almost gone, but still faintly visible. Next was the scar above her hip, a cut from when he threw a glass during an argument, and the shards flew across the floor. She had slipped and fallen onto one. It hadn't needed stitches, but it had left a thin, pink line. She'd told everyone she was clumsy. She took a photo of that, too. When she was finished, she placed everything onto a secure USB that Roman had provided. She labeled it with a sticky note, evidence. The next morning, Keanu was waiting for her on set, not with urgency, but with presence. He gave her a gentle nod as she approached, holding the envelope tight to her chest. "I have it," she whispered. He nodded, said nothing, and walked with her to the office, where Roman and Marla were already waiting. Roman took the envelope from her hands, with care, like it was something sacred. He didn't open it, just nodded. "We'll make sure it's handled properly. You did the hard part, Maya." Marla began drafting the formal documents. A restraining order would require the evidence to be reviewed by a judge. But there was more. Roman had already begun digging into Travis's background, quietly, discreetly. And what he had found wasn't just troubling, it was terrifying. Roman laid out the findings slowly, giving Maya space to process. Travis had a past one carefully buried beneath charm and corporate polish. He had worked at 3 companies over the past 8 years. At each, Roman found records of internal complaints. Nothing criminal, nothing that made it to court. But the stories were there, hidden in HR files and whispered warnings. One woman claimed Travis had stalked her after a brief relationship ended. Another reported being threatened at work, but left before an investigation could begin. Roman even tracked down a restraining order filed 5 years ago in a different state. It had expired and been sealed, but Roman's team uncovered a summary. The accusations mirrored Maya's almost exactly. Emotional manipulation, isolation, physical escalation. Maya's hands clenched in her lap. "So it wasn't just me," she said softly. Keanu leaned forward. "It was never just you." Marla looked over the findings. "This changes things. It builds a clear pattern. Judges look for that when issuing long-term protective orders. It means your case is stronger than you think." But Maya looked shaken. Why didn't anyone stop him before Roman answered gently? Because women are often expected to protect the people who hurt them, and predators like Travis are experts at staying just inside the line of law. Maya closed her eyes. I thought I was just being dramatic. You were being hurt, Keanu said. That's different. They moved quickly now, with Maya's cautious permission. The restraining order was drafted and filed under seal to avoid tipping Travis off too early. Roman set up discreet security protocols tracking devices in Maya's car emergency codes to alert his team and a private safe house if things escalated. Keanu insisted on covering all costs. Maya protested at first, but he met her concern with quiet certainty. This isn't charity. It's justice. The court date was set. A judge would review the evidence and determine if a full protection order could be granted. Roman and Marla prepared Maya for every step, what questions might be asked, how Travis might respond, and what her rights were if he showed up. But Keanu also prepared something else. He arranged for a trauma counselor to meet with Maya twice a week starting immediately. Not to talk about court, just to help her breathe again, stand again, begin again. For the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to believe she might actually be free. It was supposed to be a routine evening, nothing dramatic, nothing public. Just another charity event supporting children's hospitals, something Keanu did often and quietly. He had invited Maya to attend not for work, but simply to enjoy the evening. She had hesitated, but eventually agreed. Being in public again felt like reclaiming something. She wore a simple navy dress hair, pinned up, no makeup, except for the light gloss she always favored. Keanu had introduced her to a few guests, subtly letting people know she wasn't just his assistant, but someone he trusted and respected. She had smiled more that night than she had in weeks. For a moment, it almost felt normal. But outside in the shadows, near the valet stand, Travis waited. He stood near the marble pillar just beyond the circle of lights, wearing a pressed suit and forced smile. His phone was in his hand, but he wasn't scrolling. He was watching, waiting, seething. When Maya stepped out alone to take a call, Travis moved fast. He blocked her path before she saw him. She jumped when he grabbed her wrist, yanking her toward the far edge of the valet area. Maya, we need to talk, he hissed, his grip tightening. Her breath caught in her throat. She tried to pull away. Let go of me. But he didn't. You've been talking to people, haven't you? You think you're clever, trying to ruin me? She shook her head, rapidly panicked. No, Travis, I haven't said anything. He leaned in close. Liar. You forget I know you. You're not strong enough to do this alone. Her free hand reached for the panic button on the bracelet Roman had given her. She pressed it once, twice. Within 30 seconds, 2 plainclothes security agents were crossing the pavement. One flashed a badge, the other gripped Travis's shoulder and pulled him back. Sir, you need to step away immediately. Travis snarled. This is private. She's not yours, the agent snapped, and you just violated a temporary protection order. The moment shifted. Maya slumped slightly in relief as they separated her from him. Travis shouted something about lies about her being unstable, but no one listened. He was escorted off the premises. Police were called. A report was filed. Inside the event, Keanu got the alert on his phone. At first he froze. Then he asked to be excused. Within minutes, he was in the surveillance room, reviewing the footage. He watched as Travis grabbed Maya's arm, saw the fear in her eyes. And something in Keanu's face changed. The next hour was a blur for Maya. After giving her statement to the police, she was escorted to her temporary apartment by Keanu's private security team. They didn't ask questions. They didn't hover. One of them, a quiet woman named Lynn, simply stayed near her door as a sign of silent reassurance. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, still in the navy dress hands, trembling in her lap. She hadn't cried. Not yet. The moment had passed too fast, too violently for her emotions to catch up. She stared at the floor, trying to slow her heartbeat, trying to believe she was safe. Then there was a knock, 3 soft taps. She looked up. Lynn opened the door and nodded gently. It's him. Keanu stepped in alone. He wore no jacket now, just his black shirt rolled up at the sleeves. He looked calm, but Maya could see the weight in his eyes. He didn't speak at first. He simply walked to the kitchen counter, poured her a glass of water, and placed it gently beside her. She took it with both hands. "Thank you." "I saw the footage," Keanu said quietly. "You did everything right." Maya tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. "He was waiting for me." "I know." She looked away. "It's like, no matter what I do, he's still one step behind." Keanu sat in the chair across from her, elbows on his knees. Not anymore. There was a silence between them, the kind that settled deep in the room without pressing. She could feel he wasn't rushing her, wasn't pushing for words, just being present. Finally, she whispered, "I thought I was strong enough to handle him, that if I just stayed quiet, he'd get bored. Move on." Keanu didn't interrupt. "But I was wrong, and now he's just angrier." He nodded slowly. "Anger like his isn't about you. It's about control. And when people like that start losing it, they lash out." Her fingers gripped the glass a little tighter. "What if he tries again?" Keanu met her eyes. "Then he'll learn what it means to cross the line. But you won't face it alone. Not ever again." Something in her chest cracked open. She looked at him, eyes shining with disbelief. No one had said that to her in years. Not like that. Not with such quiet certainty. He leaned forward. "This ends now. I promise you." She blinked hard, her throat tight. "I want it to. I'm just scared of what comes next. We'll face it together," Keanu said. "One step at a time." She nodded, and for the first time that night, a tear finally fell. When her tears finally eased, Maya wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, embarrassed. But Keanu didn't look away. He didn't make the moment small or uncomfortable. He let her breathe, let her find her footing again. She took a slow sip of water, the glass steadying slightly in her hands. "Roman said they filed a new report," she murmured. "Does that mean he's going to jail?" Eventually, Keanu said, "Tonight they'll hold him. After that, the judge will review everything. Your evidence, the violation, his past behavior. The system moves slowly, but it moves." She nodded, though the tension in her shoulders didn't fully ease. "What if he gets out tomorrow?" she asked, her voice small. "He always finds a way. He won't get anywhere near you," Keanu said firmly. "Roman already doubled your security detail, and tomorrow morning Marla will push for a full protective order. Not temporary, permanent. We have enough now." Maya looked down at her hands. "I don't want to be a burden." Keanu's expression softened. "You're not a burden. You're a person who deserves safety. There's nothing inconvenient about that." Her breath trembled. "People don't usually see it that way." "Well, they should," he replied quietly. She looked around the small apartment, the shadows, the locked windows. "This doesn't feel like home." "It doesn't have to," Keanu said. "It just has to be safe. For now." She nodded again. Her fingers brushed the burner phone in her pocket, the one he had given her. It felt heavier now, as if it carried more than just numbers, it carried a promise. "Do you think I'll ever have a normal life again?" she asked. "Yes," Keanu answered without hesitation. "But not by pretending this isn't happening. By facing it. By ending it." She exhaled slowly, as if letting his certainty become her own. Keanu stood not abruptly, but with quiet intention. "I'll stay outside tonight. The hallway not here. You deserve space to rest. But if you need anything, knock. Call. You know how to reach me." "Why are you doing all this?" she whispered. He paused. "Because no one should have to fight this alone. And because you matter, more than you think." Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears weren't from fear, they were from release. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded once, then walked to the door. Before stepping out, he glanced back at her, his expression steady, resolved. "This ends now," he repeated. "I won't let him take one more piece of your life." When the door clicked shut, Maya let out a long breath. She looked around the apartment again, and it felt different. Still temporary, still unfamiliar, but no longer hopeless. For the first time in a long time, she believed she wasn't fighting in the dark anymore. Someone was standing with her, someone who wasn't leaving. The The next morning, Los Angeles woke up to a post that no one expected. On Keanu Reeves's official account, an account known mostly for quiet gratitude movie updates and the occasional motorcycle snapshot, there appeared a long, unfiltered message. No photos, no hashtags, just words. He didn't name anyone. He didn't need to. He started simply, "There are wounds you can't see. And they're often the ones that take the longest to heal." It wasn't a press release. It wasn't polished by a publicist. It was raw, personal, meant to be read slowly. Invisible bruises, they exist. They exist in silence, behind perfect smiles and polite nods. Behind every "I'm fine" is a moment someone almost didn't survive. He paused between each sentence in the way only Keanu could, the way that made people lean in instead of scroll away. "I've spent most of my life listening," the post continued, "watching, learning. And recently someone reminded me that silence can sometimes protect the wrong people." He went on to speak about domestic abuse, not as a celebrity, not as a spokesman, but as a witness. As someone who had seen the damage, who had held the aftermath in trembling hands, who had made a vow to stand up now that the truth was no longer hidden. "Courage," he wrote, "isn't loud. It's not always a headline. Sometimes it's just someone walking into a police station one shaky step at a time. Sometimes it's someone finally saying enough after years of being told they're too much to handle." He didn't refer to Maya, he didn't refer to Travis, but the emotion in every line pulsed with meaning. He wrote about accountability, he wrote about protection, and most of all, he wrote about the power of community, how speaking up creates space for others to do the same. It's easy to love someone when they're strong, but loving them when they're vulnerable, that's the real test of who we are. The post ended with a quiet call to action. Believe survivors, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then, because it's never about scandal, it's about saving lives. Then below all that, just 2 words: "I'm listening." Within minutes, the internet erupted. It wasn't just fans reposting it, it was survivors, advocates, counselors, even former co-stars sharing stories they'd never told before. People from every corner of the globe began replying with their own words, some trembling, some furious, all real. "I thought I was alone. My ex was a doctor. No one believed me. I haven't spoken about this in 20 years, but maybe now I will." The floodgates opened not with drama, but with healing. And in a quiet apartment just a few blocks away, Maya sat in silence, holding her phone in both hands, reading every word, every comment, every truth. Her tears came in waves, but this time they didn't feel like drowning. They felt like breathing for the first time. By the end of the day, the post had gone viral. Over 4 million likes, hundreds of thousands of comments. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered, it was the stories. Underneath Keanu's post, a mother from Texas wrote about escaping her abusive husband with her 2 kids in the middle of the night. A nurse from Detroit shared how her partner isolated her from friends for years, before she even realized it was abuse. One man said his father had broken his arm when he was 12 and he hadn't spoken of it until now. These weren't fans praising a celebrity. These were people, real people taking a breath they'd held for decades, and somehow a single post made them feel safe enough to exhale. Keanu didn't reply to every comment. He didn't have to. Instead, he reposted a few resources, national hotlines, shelters. In his Instagram story, he simply posted the words, "If you need help, get it. If you need space, take it. If you need someone to listen, I will." At that moment, Keanu Reeves wasn't a movie star. He was a bridge. Maya sat on her small, rented couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders like armor. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, but she barely noticed. She couldn't stop reading. Comment after comment, each one like a mirror to a wound she hadn't dared name. A woman in Montana described how her ex used to grip her arm just tightly enough to leave a mark that faded by morning. Maya looked at the faint bruise on her own wrist and shivered. There were stories that made her cry, stories that made her sit upright in shock, stories that sounded like her diary, only written by strangers. She wasn't alone. She had felt broken, ashamed, even guilty for leaving, But now she saw it differently. This wasn't about weakness. It was about survival. She looked again at Keanu's words. The part that stuck with her most wasn't the statistics or the carefully chosen phrases. It was that one simple line: silence can sometimes protect the wrong people. She had stayed quiet for years, first out of love, then fear, then shame. But now, she wasn't sure she wanted to stay quiet anymore. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Keanu. No emojis, no pressure. Just one line. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." She stared at it for a long time, then typed something back. "Thank you for seeing me, for really seeing me." And for the first time in months, maybe years, she let out a long, steady breath, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. In the days that followed, Maya stayed indoors as much as possible. The world outside buzzed with speculation. Tabloids ran blurred photos of Keanu's post. Commentators debated the meaning behind it. Online gossip forums tried to guess who the woman in question might be. But inside that small, safe apartment, Maya felt a quiet shift happening inside herself. She wasn't hiding. She was healing. Keanu had arranged for private security to check in discreetly. A driver picked up groceries and prescriptions when needed. His team never asked questions. They just did what needed to be done. Quiet care. No spotlight. But what meant the most wasn't what Keanu did. It was what he didn't do. He didn't pressure her to go public. He didn't make it about himself. He simply held space for her, without expectation, without timeline. And the world noticed that too. One morning, a national women's advocacy group reposted Keanu's message with the caption, "When men use their voices for protection, not power." This is what allyship looks like. Soon after, a wave of support followed. Other celebrities spoke up. Nonprofits reported record spikes in calls to support lines. Teachers shared the post with high school students. Therapists printed it out for group discussions. It was never about Maya's name. It was about the invisible pain so many carried, and the courage it took to say enough. Meanwhile, Maya kept reading the comments every night before bed. Sometimes she laughed softly at the unexpected humor people used to survive. Sometimes she wept into her pillow until she fell asleep. One night she hesitated before shutting off her phone, then opened a blank email. She didn't address it to anyone. She just began typing. She wrote about the first time Travis had scared her. She wrote about the apologies that followed, the gifts, the way he'd twist her words and make her doubt her own memory. She wrote about the night he showed up near the valet, grabbing her arm in public like she was still his. And then she wrote about Keanu, not as a savior, but as someone who simply listened without needing to fix her, without asking her to move faster than she was ready. When she finished, it was late. The city outside was quiet. She saved the draft. She wasn't ready to share it yet, but for the first time in a long time, she was writing her story on her terms. And somewhere across the city, Keanu Reeves sat in his backyard, watching the stars. He didn't know she was writing, but he hoped she would. The hallway outside the courtroom was quiet, but Maya's heart pounded like it was trying to escape her chest. She sat on a cold bench, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her palms were damp. Her legs trembled beneath her long gray skirt. Next to her, Keanu sat without saying a word. He didn't need to speak. His presence was steady, warm, and grounding. He wore a simple dark suit, no sunglasses, no entourage, just a man showing up. Across the hallway, Travis arrived with a flourish. His tailored suit was sharp. His lawyer trailed behind him, a polished woman with a clipboard and a practiced smile. Travis nodded at someone he recognized, then leaned in to whisper something into his lawyer's ear, smirking as he did. Maya didn't look up, but she saw the smirk. She felt the familiar chill of fear tighten her shoulders. Keanu gently placed a bottle of water beside her. Then his hand rested lightly on her back, just for a second. Just enough to say, "I'm here." When the bailiff opened the doors and called their names, Maya stood slowly. Her knees wobbled, but she walked. Inside the courtroom was small, but formal. The judge sat high at the front, flipping through documents. A clerk organized files. A few members of the public sat quietly in the back. Maya's attorney whispered, "You'll read your statement after Travis. Just stay calm. You're not alone." She nodded. Travis took the stand first. His lawyer guided him through a line of questions meant to make him look cooperative, concerned, and misunderstood. He spoke clearly. His voice oozed charm. He called Maya someone I cared deeply about. He said he was confused by her accusations and that he only wanted closure. When the lawyer asked if he had ever harmed Maya, Travis shook his head with theatrical disbelief. "Absolutely not," he said. "I loved her." Maya didn't move, but her fists clenched in her lap. Then it was her turn. Her lawyer helped her to the front. The bailiff handed her the printed statement she'd prepared. Her name was called. Her hand trembled as she raised the paper. For a moment, her vision blurred. Her mouth felt dry, but then she saw Keanu. He was sitting just behind the railing, not as a movie star, just a man in the front row watching her with quiet strength in his eyes. She took a breath, and she began. "I'm here today to ask for a restraining order against Travis Clark," she read. "This is not easy for me. I didn't want this. I wanted peace. But what I've lived through is real." Her voice wavered. She paused. Then she continued, and with each word her voice steadied. She spoke of the fear, the control, the moments that didn't leave bruises but stole her voice. She didn't cry, not here, not now. She finished the last line, folded the paper, and sat down. Her hands were shaking, but she had done it. The judge looked down from the bench fingers steepled beneath his chin. For a moment, there was silence in the room. Only the faint ticking of the courtroom clock filled the space. Then the judge spoke. "Mr. Reeves, you were present for some of the incidents listed. Would you be willing to speak under oath?" There was a quiet murmur in the room. Maya's heart froze. Keanu stood slowly. He didn't hesitate. "Yes, Your Honor." He walked forward with calm, steady steps and took the oath at the stand. Maya watched him, breath held tight in her chest. The judge gestured for him to proceed. Keanu didn't read from notes. He didn't have any. He simply folded his hands, looked toward the judge, and began to speak. "I met Maya through a small community garden project. I didn't know her well at first, but I noticed things over time. Little things." She smiled less than others. She flinched when people raised their voices. One day, she showed up with a sprained wrist she blamed on a step, but her story didn't line up. He paused, and one evening I saw her partner corner her outside her building. I was across the street, far enough not to hear words, but close enough to see her body language. The fear wasn't subtle. His voice was low, controlled. "I didn't intervene right away," he said. "I didn't know the full story. But later, Maya told me about the patterns, how her world had been shrinking, how she doubted her own memory, how she felt crazy." The courtroom was still. Even Travis sat without his usual arrogance, tapping his knee with a pen. Keanu's eyes never drifted to Travis. He didn't give him the attention. "People think abuse always looks like bruises or broken bones," he said. "But sometimes it's silence. It's isolation. It's fear that follows you home and doesn't let you sleep." He shifted in his seat. "I've worked with survivors. I've lost someone to this kind of pain. I know the signs, and I know the courage it takes to speak up. I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to confirm what I saw, and to ask that this woman who has already lived through so much be given the space to live without fear." The judge leaned back. His expression didn't change much, but something shifted in the air. Keanu nodded once, then stepped down. He didn't look back as he returned to his seat. Maya stared at him with wide, grateful eyes. Her throat ached with unshed tears. Her lawyer squeezed her arm gently. The court went into a brief recess while the judge reviewed the evidence. Keanu sat beside her again. He didn't speak, just offered her another bottle of water and a quiet glance that said more than words ever could. She closed her eyes and breathed. The worst part was almost over. The courtroom reconvened 30 minutes later. The judge returned with a small stack of papers in hand, and a solemn look that quieted every whisper in the gallery. "All rise." Everyone stood. Maya's legs trembled beneath her, but she remained upright. Keanu stood beside her, hands folded, eyes locked on the judge. "You may be seated." The judge cleared his throat. After reviewing the testimonies, the evidence submitted, and the statements made by both parties, he began, "I am granting the petitioner's request for a full restraining order." Maya's breath caught in her throat. The respondent, Travis Brandt, is to remain no less than 200 feet away from Ms. Maya Lin at all times. This includes her residence place of employment and any public events where her attendance is known in advance. The order will remain in effect for a period of 3 years, pending further review. There was a sudden rustling of movement behind them. Travis had stood up. "What? You can't be serious," he began, voice rising. His lawyer touched his arm sharply, whispering a warning, but Travis shook him off. "She's lying. This is a setup. She's using that guy's fame to ruin me." The judge's gavel slammed down once. "Mr. Brandt, you are out of order. Sit down immediately or you will be removed." Travis hesitated, jaw clenched, and finally dropped back into his seat, his glare cut toward Maya. Cold, cunning. But for the first time, she didn't look away. She met his stare and held it, then turned her head and never looked back. The judge signed the order with a quick stroke. "This hearing is concluded." As the court clerk read out the final paperwork instructions, Maya stood slowly. Her legs still shook, but her spine was straight. Keanu placed a gentle hand on her back. "You did it," he whispered. "I was so scared," she said under her breath. "But I didn't run." "You didn't just survive," Keanu replied. "You stood up." They walked out of the courtroom together. The late morning sun cast warm light across the courthouse steps. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was a turning point. Maya looked out over the city, beyond the marble pillars. She felt the wind on her face, not as something to brace against, but as something alive. Outside the building, a reporter called out a question. "Mr. Reeves, any comment?" Keanu paused, then looked at Maya. She gave him a slight nod. He turned to the camera. "Today wasn't about me. It was about a woman finding her voice. That's the story." And with that, he turned back to her. The cameras faded behind them. But the weight of what they'd done remained. A legal victory, a public stand, and the quiet, powerful beginning of something Maya thought she'd lost forever, her own strength. 3 weeks after the courtroom hearing, Maya received an email that made her fingers go numb. It was from a former coworker at her old production company, the one she had quietly left before joining Keanu's team. The subject line read, "I think you deserve to know the truth." Inside was a forwarded string of internal messages between executives. Her name, Travis's name, mentions of reputation concerns, conflicting reports, and a chilling phrase, "His discretion will cost us, but the alternative is worse." Maya stared at the screen in disbelief. Travis hadn't just sabotaged her job prospects with personal rumors. He had business ties with the company. Deep ones. He had worked in public relations for years, handling crisis spin. He knew exactly how to twist perception, manipulate decision-makers, and silence uncomfortable stories. And somehow he had used that access to discredit her, to make her exit look like a liability, to make sure no one would ask why she left so suddenly. It wasn't just personal abuse anymore. It was professional sabotage, carefully calculated. She printed the emails and handed them to Keanu that afternoon in a plain envelope. He read them in silence, jaw tightening. "This changes everything," he said. Keanu immediately contacted his legal team. They convened a quiet meeting in his private office, away from the bustle of the set. His longtime attorney, Dana Whitaker, reviewed the documents and nodded slowly. "This goes beyond restraining orders," she said. "We're looking at defamation, career damages, and potentially even workplace retaliation. If we can prove collusion between Travis and the executives, it opens the door to civil litigation." Maya sat quietly in the corner. Her hands were folded in her lap, eyes lowered. When they asked her if she was willing to testify, she hesitated. "I don't want revenge," she said softly, But I don't want anyone else to go through what I did. If I stay silent, he wins. Keanu looked at her. This isn't about tearing him down. It's about building something safer. Maya nodded. Dana's team got to work behind the scenes. No press, no leaks. Everything was done in private. They began collecting contracts, emails, and call logs from Maya's former employer. A private investigator followed the money trail, tracing how Travis's consulting company had received quiet payments from the studio 6 months before Maya's departure. There were no formal reports filed about Maya, but there were whispers in HR memos, carefully worded doubts that mirrored the language Travis had used during their breakup. It was a web, not wide, but tangled enough to catch someone. And while the lawyers did their work, Keanu did something else. He made a quiet donation, 6 figures, to a women's legal defense organization. No press release, no headline, just a note to his lawyer. Set it up in Maya's name, because for him this wasn't just one battle. It was a pattern. He'd seen it before. Silenced voices, closed doors, private shame treated as public inconvenience. He was done watching. Maya still found herself torn. Some days she woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, wanting justice not just for herself, but for every woman who'd been manipulated into silence. Other days fear still lingered, fear of becoming the face of something she didn't ask for, fear that her name would be dragged through headlines again, that people wouldn't see the truth, only the noise. Keanu never pressured her. Instead, he brought stillness. He'd stop by with tea talk about nothing in particular, or just sit beside her while she stared at the garden behind the house. Once, he said softly, "You don't have to carry the whole fight. Just take the next step. We'll handle the rest." It was that we that mattered. For the first time in a long time, Maya didn't feel alone. Dana's legal team continued gathering evidence. A non-disclosure agreement that had been slipped into Maya's final exit paperwork suddenly took on new weight. The language was aggressive, filled with threats of financial consequence for any reputational harm. It was unusual, especially for someone who had left on good terms, at least on paper. When the investigator tracked down another woman who had also worked under the same executive structure and who had been pushed out after a mysterious conflict involving Travis, the picture grew clearer. She too had stories, emails, even a recorded conversation. They weren't isolated incidents, they were patterns. Travis hadn't just targeted Maya, he had a history, and each time his involvement was buried under layers of business connections, spin, and silence clauses. Keanu listened to the full findings late one night in his study. His expression didn't change. But at the end, he looked up and said, "How many others haven't spoken?" Maya answered quietly, "Too many." That's when Keanu made the second decision. He would expand the legal aid fund, not just for Maya, not just for this lawsuit, but for women and men who found themselves trapped by the same network of intimidation and erasure. Dana helped him draft the paperwork. The fund would offer pro bono legal support for victims of harassment in the entertainment industry, especially those navigating non-disclosure agreements, retaliation, and blackballing. It would be run independently with Maya's input as a silent advisor. When she learned that Keanu was naming the fund after a childhood story, she once told him, "The Sparrow Foundation," after a tiny bird that kept returning to her grandmother's windowsill. Despite storms, she wept. Not because it was grand, but because it was gentle, quiet, true to her. The civil case was almost ready. But they would keep it sealed until the time was right. For now, it was enough to know the truth was being documented, preserved. One evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sky fade into indigo, Maya whispered, "I don't want to fight forever." "You won't have to," Keanu replied, "just long enough to change the ending." The sun was barely up when Keanu stepped into the quiet boardroom of a discreet Beverly Hills law office. The space had no cameras, no press, no red carpet fanfare. Just a long oak table, a pot of black coffee, and 12 seats filled by people who rarely gathered in the same room. Studio heads, senior HR leaders, union representatives, legal advisors, and 2 women from a nonprofit that had been working for years to combat abuse in the industry. Keanu didn't speak first. He waited until everyone settled, then passed around a single document. It didn't have Maya's name, but it told her story. It was blunt, a timeline of what she'd endured. Not just the bruises or the harassment, but the corporate neglect, the gaps in accountability, the unchecked influence of a man like Travis who had weaponized charm connections and fear. The room went silent. Keanu finally spoke. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the weight behind it. "I'm not here to blame individuals," he said. "I'm here because someone trusted me with her truth. And if this can happen to her, it's still happening to others. We need to do better. Quiet conversations behind closed doors won't stop men like him. But action will." The nonprofit reps nodded. They'd seen it all before survivors pushed out, while their abusers remained protected by plausible deniability and layers of legal shielding. What was different now was that someone with global influence was not just speaking up, but inviting the people in power to the table. Keanu outlined 3 proposals: an independent third-party ombudsman for misconduct claims within entertainment studios, a cross-company survivors fund to support employees during investigations or exit transitions, and an anonymous whistleblower system not tied to internal HR. The room didn't push back. Not this time. One executive from a major streaming platform spoke slowly. "I've known about stories like this, but we never had someone brave enough to bring us a solution. Until now." That moment marked the shift from reaction to responsibility. Back at her safe apartment, Maya wasn't aware of the meeting at first. She was poring over enrollment materials for an online creative writing course. It had been years since she allowed herself to imagine writing again, but that morning she opened her laptop, typed out a short paragraph, and stared at the blinking cursor like it was a doorway. The fear hadn't vanished, but something inside her had shifted. She didn't want to live in reaction anymore. She wanted to create again. Later that afternoon, Keanu stopped by. He found her in the middle of rewriting the first chapter of a children's book she'd abandoned 2 years ago. The table was scattered with pencil sketches and rough outlines. When he gently picked up one of the pages and smiled, she looked almost embarrassed. "I'm not sure it's any good," she said. He met her eyes and answered, "It doesn't have to be good. It just has to be yours." Over the next week, Keanu kept the round table momentum alive. He followed up with every executive, every advocate, every legal representative who had attended. Not with pressure, but with clarity. This isn't a trend, he told them. It's a responsibility. Within days, 2 studios committed to funding the Independent Ombudsman program. Another pledged to implement anonymous reporting by the end of the fiscal year. The Survivors Transition Fund became a collaborative project, each participant offering resources, office space, legal hours, or training programs. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fast, but it was real. A system that had failed one woman was slowly starting to evolve. During this time, Maya continued healing. She attended therapy sessions without skipping. She spent mornings journaling, afternoons sketching new characters for her book, and evenings taking online classes that reminded her why she loved storytelling in the first place. Some nights she still jumped at loud noises. Some mornings she woke with her heart pounding. But something fundamental was shifting. She was growing. One evening, Keanu invited her to the small garden behind his home, the same place where she had helped prune tomato vines months earlier. A string of warm lights hung overhead. The air smelled faintly of basil and cedar. She sat on one of the wooden benches while Keanu watered a row of potted herbs. After a few minutes, he glanced over at her. "Dana told me you finished the outline of your book," he said. Her cheeks warmed. "It's rough. Everything good starts rough," he said with a small smile. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know if it will ever be published, or if I'm even strong enough to finish it." He set the watering can down and walked over to sit beside her. "You don't have to be strong every day," he said. "You just have to keep choosing yourself, and you're doing that." She looked toward the garden lights, blinking softly in the dusk. "Do you ever wonder if people like Travis will always slip through the cracks? Some will." Keanu admitted, "But fewer if people like you speak up. What you lived through, it won't define you." But what you do now, that might inspire someone else to stand up. Her eyes stung, not with fear, with something that felt like purpose. And if I'm not ready to inspire anyone, she whispered. Then you take your time, Keanu replied. Healing isn't a race. She smiled softly. For the first time in a long while, the bone-deep heaviness she carried felt lighter. Later that night, after Keanu walked her to her car, she sat for a moment before starting the engine. Her journal lay open in the passenger seat, a half-finished sentence waiting. She picked up her pen. I am not what happened to me, she wrote slowly. I am what I choose next. She closed the journal with steady hands. It wasn't justice yet, it wasn't closure yet, but it was a turning point, and she was finally ready to step into the next chapter. Letters from the shadows. The first letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Maya found it tucked under the door of her temporary apartment. No return address, no signature, just her name written in careful handwriting on the front of a plain envelope. She hesitated before opening it, her heartbeat quickening. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper written in blue ink. I heard what happened. I work in post-production on Studio Row, and I've lived a version of your story for the last 2 years. I never had the courage to say anything. I'm glad you did. I hope someday I can. Maya sank onto the couch, the letter trembling in her hands. She read it twice, then a third time, the words blurring as tears filled her eyes. It was the first time she realized that other women had been watching her fight from the shadows. Women who didn't know her personally, but who felt connected to her survival. By the end of the week, there were 3 more letters. One came through internal studio mail. Another was slipped into her tote bag while she was on set. The third arrived by courier with no listed sender. Each one carried a different voice, a different fear, a different story. But the pattern was unmistakable. Assistants, interns, junior producers, women just starting their careers, women who had crossed paths with men who used charm as a weapon and power as a cage. One letter in particular made Maya's stomach twist. I tried to leave twice. Both times he threatened to ruin my reputation. My supervisor told me to keep the peace because he was important to the production. I thought I was alone. Seeing you stand up made me believe I might not be. Maya folded that letter carefully, setting it beside the others, but she couldn't stop thinking about it. The way the handwriting shook, the way the words felt like they had been scraped from a wound that had never healed. That night, long after midnight, she turned on a small lamp in her living room. The soft glow filled the quiet apartment as she spread all the letters in front of her, reading them slowly, one by one. Some were short confessions. Some were detailed accounts of months of manipulation. Some were just 2 or 3 lines, barely more than whispers. The more she read, the harder she cried. Not out of fear, not out of pain, but out of heartbreak for the women who still lived in silence, carrying bruises that no one saw. When morning came, she hadn't slept. She gathered the letters into a neat stack, tied them with a ribbon, and placed them gently into her bag. She knew who needed to see them. Keanu arrived early to the studio for a meeting, but when he saw Maya waiting for him near the private side entrance, he immediately slowed his pace. She looked drained, her eyes tired, her shoulders heavy with something he didn't yet understand. "Maya," he said softly, "what's wrong?" She opened her bag, pulled out the stack of letters, and placed them in his hands. "They're not just about me," she whispered. "There are so many others." Keanu held the stack of letters with a level of care that made Maya's throat tighten. He didn't open them right away. Instead, he guided her to a quiet hallway behind the soundstage, a place far from camera's assistants or anyone who might interrupt. "Let's sit," he said gently. They sat on a small wooden bench used sometimes by the lighting crew. Then Keanu began reading, slowly, intentionally. His expression changed with each letter. Concern, sadness, a quiet simmering anger at the injustice threaded through every story. When he finished the last one, he exhaled long and heavy. "How long have you been getting these?" he asked. "About a week," Maya said. "They keep coming. Different women, different departments, different parts of the industry, some I've never even met. Keanu looked down at the pages again, running a hand across the edges as though the words themselves were fragile. "They're reaching out to you," he said, "because you stood up, because you told the truth." Maya shook her head. "I wasn't trying to be an example. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to keep living like that." "Sometimes surviving is what inspires people," he replied. "Sometimes that's all it takes." They sat in silence for a few moments. The soundstage hum filled the air, the distant echo of an actor rehearsing lines, the clank of a cart moving equipment, the soft buzz of a camera battery charging. It felt strange to hear the normal rhythms of set life while holding stories of pain and fear in their hands. "What do I do with this?" Maya whispered. "I'm not a leader. I'm not trained for this. I'm just trying to rebuild my life." "You don't have to do it alone," Keanu said. "No one should face this alone." He thought for a moment, his eyes lowering as though he were piecing something together quietly in his mind. Maya watched him, trusting that look. It was the same calm, steady expression he had the day he first saw the bruise, when he didn't push, didn't demand, didn't pry, just stayed present. Finally he spoke. "What if we create something for them, something that doesn't require going public, something private, something safe?" Maya frowned slightly. "Like what? Emergency support," he said. "A way out, a place to stay, legal help, therapy, transportation, whatever they need to leave a dangerous situation." Maya blinked. "But how would we do that without drawing attention?" Quietly, Keanu said. "No announcements, no press, just action. I'll fund it anonymously. You'll help design the system, a small team, trusted people, real protection." Her breath caught. "Keanu, that's a huge commitment." "So is surviving," he said softly, "and they deserve better than silence." For the first time since receiving the letters, Maya felt the weight in her chest lift just a little. A spark of purpose flickered inside her. A sense that maybe her suffering, though painful, could become something strong enough to protect others. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier. "Let's do it." Keanu nodded once. "Then we begin today." The essay began with a single sentence. "I didn't realize I was disappearing until the day someone finally saw me." Maya stared at those words on her laptop screen for almost an hour, her fingers hovering above the keyboard as if touching the keys might shatter her resolve. It had taken her months to reach this point. Months of therapy, months of steady patient rebuilding, months of learning to breathe without feeling watched, months of reminding herself she was no longer trapped. She had healed enough to tell her story. Not publicly, not with her name or picture or any detail that could expose her safety, but anonymously with careful wording and with truth guiding every line. Keanu never pushed her to write it. He only said, "When you're ready, your voice will know." And she found that to be true. The voice inside her had grown stronger, steady enough to speak without shaking. Now, sitting in her small but warm apartment, she began writing. She described how the relationship had begun, the charm, the flattery, the subtle shifts that felt like nothing at first, but added up to everything. She wrote about how emotional control turned into isolation, how isolation turned into intimidation, and how intimidation turned into bruises no makeup could hide. She didn't name Travis. She didn't name the studio where she'd once worked. She didn't name Keanu. She chose anonymity, but she refused to hide the truth. Her words flowed with a clarity she had never expected. She described the morning she realized she wasn't safe. She described the night she sat trembling in a tiny bathroom, waiting for the storm outside the door to pass. She described the moment she broke, the moment she reached out for help, the moment she realized she couldn't survive alone. Then she wrote about the turning point, about the person who noticed the bruise she didn't mean to reveal, about the quiet support she never expected, about the gentle question that cracked open the silence she'd been living in. She never mentioned Keanu's name, but she didn't need to. She wrote about kindness that asked for nothing in return, bravery that came not from confrontation, but from presence, steadiness that made room for her fear, protection without possessiveness, help without conditions. By the time she finished the first draft, her hands were shaking. The document glowed on her screen more than 4,000 words of pain, survival, fear, and awakening. She read it twice, revising, trimming, sharpening where needed. When she finally clicked send, submitting it to a well-known online magazine that specialized in long-form narratives about real human experiences, she felt a physical shift inside her. Not relief exactly, not closure, but something like reclaiming her breath after years of holding it. The editors responded within hours. "This is powerful. We want to publish it immediately. Your anonymity is fully protected." Maya's heart pounded. Her throat tightened. She sat back in her chair, tears blurring her vision. She had told her story, and she had survived telling it. The essay went live at dawn the next morning. She didn't expect what happened next. The essay spread faster than Maya ever imagined. By noon, it had been shared thousands of times. By evening, it had crossed 1 million views. People didn't just read it, they reacted. They commented. They told their own stories. Survivors wrote paragraphs about the moments they realized they were in danger. Others admitted they had stayed silent for years because they were afraid no one would believe them. Some simply thanked the anonymous author for saying out loud what they had never found the courage to speak. Maya read the first 100 comments, then the next 100, then more. Her heart broke and healed and cracked all over again as she watched a wave of voices rise from the shadows. She had thought her pain was singular. Now she saw how wrong she'd been. So many people were carrying invisible wounds. By the time she stopped scrolling, her hands were shaking again, but for a different reason. She felt connected, seen, not alone. She didn't know the essay had reached Keanu until her phone buzzed. A message appeared on her screen. "I read it. You spoke with strength. Really proud of you." She stared at the words, her eyes stinging. Keanu never used his influence as a shield for her. He never tried to take credit. But in that moment, she knew he had read every line with the same protective calm that defined everything he had done since the day he noticed her bruise. What she didn't expect was what came next. Within 48 hours, entertainment journalists began circulating a theory. They referenced Keanu's earlier public post about invisible bruises. They noted the timing. They noted that Keanu had stepped out of a high-profile charity event early on the night Maya was attacked. They pointed out how his assistant hadn't been seen publicly for months. No names were mentioned, no official confirmations, but the hints were there, woven together by anonymous sources and speculative blogs. Some outlets framed it as a story of compassion. Others framed it as scandal. Keanu didn't respond. He didn't take interviews or release statements. He stayed silent the same way he always did when noise swirled around him. But inside that silence was a fierce focus on protecting Maya's identity, her boundaries, her healing. Meanwhile, the essay's impact began rippling through the industry. Studio HR departments held emergency meetings. Production companies sent out memos about zero-tolerance policies. Several large agencies reached out to the magazine asking to partner on initiatives supporting survivors. And for the first time in years, assistants, especially women of color, began speaking out in anonymous forums about the silent abuses they'd endured. Maya watched these discussions grow, her heart clenching at the sheer volume of hidden suffering. But she also saw something else, rising unity. On the 5th night after the essay was published, Maya sat alone on her balcony, the city glowing beneath her. She wrapped her hands around a warm mug and breathed in the cool air. She felt lighter, calmer, not healed yet, but healing. The essay had taken something from her, the weight of secrecy, and it had given something back in return, a voice strong enough to stand on its own. She whispered into the night, as if speaking to her past self. "I'm still here." And for the first time, those words felt real. The weeks following the essay felt like stepping into a new world. Maya had expected backlash, fear, maybe even regret. But instead, she found herself waking up each morning with an unfamiliar but welcome feeling in her chest. Hope, real hope, the kind that didn't vanish with the first anxious thought of the day. For the first time in years, her mornings did not revolve around survival. They revolved around creation. She had always loved design. Before Travis, before the chaos, before the bruises she hid under long sleeves, she had dreamed of using art to help people feel safe. Safe spaces, safe workplaces, safe communities. She once imagined creating visuals that made people feel seen and protected. Now, with her story out in the world and the weight on her shoulders lighter, she returned to that dream. She signed up for a virtual workshop through a nonprofit that supported women entering creative fields. It was a simple program, but something about its structure made her feel grounded again. The instructors encouraged participants to take personal experiences and transform them into visual symbolism. For Maya, every stroke of color became an outlet. Every sketch became a way to reclaim something she had lost. One night, as she sat in front of her tablet in the quiet living room of her apartment, she began drawing a doorway. At first, it was just a rectangular shape. Then came the light, warm, soft spilling outward onto an empty floor. She didn't know why the image felt right, only that it captured what she had been searching for since the day she left Travis. A door opened just enough for someone who felt trapped to see what freedom might look like. She titled the piece, "Exit Begins with Light." The nonprofit she worked with encouraged her to submit it to a design grant competition run by a women-led arts organization in Los Angeles. Maya nearly deleted the application twice, convinced she wasn't ready, convinced no one wanted to hear more from her. But she submitted it anyway. 3 weeks later, an email arrived. She stared at it for a long time, rereading the first line again and again until it finally felt real. "Congratulations, Maya. You've been selected as one of this year's grant recipients." Her hand flew to her mouth as she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She hadn't won an award. She hadn't gained fame. But she had gained something she feared she'd lost forever: a beginning. The grant allowed her to launch a small design initiative focused on supporting safe spaces in creative environments. Posters, digital toolkits, awareness campaigns, simple messages crafted with purpose. She spent late nights in her apartment, surrounded by sketches of doors, windows, gentle landscapes, and silhouettes stepping from darkness into light. She wanted every piece to speak to someone who felt unseen. When she shared her first collection online, the response was softer but deeper than she expected. People didn't just like her work. They shared stories. They wrote messages. They thanked her for giving shape to feelings they never had words for. Then one morning she opened her phone to find her open door poster shared by a major arts account with 2 simple words written above it: "This helps." The image went viral overnight. The viral moment changed everything. As the shares multiplied, invitations began arriving in her inbox. Small galleries, community centers, advocacy groups, and even a few studios reached out asking if she would consider presenting her work. Not as a survivor forced into the spotlight, but as an artist with a message. One invitation stood out. A women-led gallery in Los Angeles was hosting an exhibit on healing through design and wanted to feature her open-door poster as the centerpiece. The curator's message was simple: "Your work captures something many people feel but can't describe. We'd be honored to showcase it." Maya almost declined out of instinct. Exhibits meant crowds' attention questions. Even if her name was gaining recognition, part of her still feared being seen. But this time, the fear didn't silence her. It only reminded her why she started drawing again. She accepted the invitation. The night of the exhibit arrived as a cool breeze swept through downtown Los Angeles. The gallery glowed beneath warm lights, its glass doors revealing a curated path of artwork created by survivors and advocates. Maya walked in heart-pounding, unsure whether anyone would even notice her piece among the others. But they did. Clusters of visitors stood around her poster, whispering, pointing, studying it with thoughtful eyes. Some took photos, others took notes. One woman stood with her arms crossed tightly, eyes glistening as if seeing the artwork had unlocked something she had hidden away. Maya watched in silence, overwhelmed by the quiet power of the moment. She had created something gentle, yet it spoke louder than she ever had. She didn't expect anyone she knew to show up. She hadn't told many people. She didn't want the evening to turn into a spectacle. So when she felt someone step beside her, she assumed it was another visitor. But then she heard a familiar voice. "It's even more beautiful in person." She turned and saw Keanu dressed simply, without any attention-drawing details, hands in his pockets, eyes full of genuine pride. No cameras followed him, no entourage stood behind him. He had come alone. Before she could speak, he pulled her into a gentle hug. "I told you, the world needed your voice," he said softly. "This is only the beginning." Maya looked back at the poster, the soft glow of the open doorway reflecting in her eyes. For so long she had associated doorways with fear, with escape, with running before someone slammed it shut. Now, for the first time, the image meant possibility. A future she had shaped herself. Visitors continued to study her work, unaware of the emotional storm inside her. She felt her shoulders loosen, her breath steady. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't surviving. She was building something. Keanu remained beside her, silent but steady, letting her take in every second of her own victory. For the first time in years, Maya felt something powerful settle inside her. She felt free. Change didn't come with fanfare. It didn't arrive through breaking news headlines or dramatic statements. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the soft shift of wind before a storm. But within days of Maya's exhibit and the ripple from her anonymous essay, the industry started humming with a new kind of awareness. The first signs appeared in emails sent late at night from small studios across Los Angeles and New York. HR departments circulated updated guidelines about workplace relationships, reporting protocols, and emotional wellness resources. Some of the changes were tentative, almost shy. Others were bold, surprisingly clear. Anonymous reporting hotlines, mandatory training for department heads, emergency housing stipends for employees in crisis. No one mentioned Maya by name, but the timing was unmistakable. Keanu, meanwhile, stepped into a different kind of role. He didn't make announcements. He didn't stand behind podiums or appear on talk shows. Instead, he sat in long, quiet meetings with studio executives, urging them to build environments where exploitation couldn't hide in plain sight. He helped create funding for victim support services and pledged ongoing financial backing for third-party safety audits, a move that surprised even veteran industry advocates. Whenever executives called to thank him, he deflected the praise. He told them the same simple truth. "I'm not doing this for recognition. I'm doing it because it's right." Word spread quickly. Other celebrities reached out privately, some offering donations, others asking how they could support their own assistants and staff members more effectively. A few actors with massive followings made short but powerful posts emphasizing mental health, emotional safety, and the need to break the silence around abuse. None referenced Maya directly, but the message was clear. Her story had awakened something far bigger than herself. Unions followed. The Actors Guild issued updated assistant protection guidelines. Crew unions sent out new safety protocols regarding on-set harassment and off-hours threats. Even casting agencies, often silent in these matters, released internal memos reminding employees that emotional intimidation and coercive control were forms of workplace misconduct. It wasn't a tidal wave, it wasn't overnight transformation, but it was real, and it was happening. Maya watched these developments unfold from the quiet comfort of her apartment. She'd bookmarked dozens of articles, tweets, and letters. At first, she wasn't sure how to feel. Gratitude mixed with disbelief. She never imagined her art, her words, her survival would move an entire industry toward change. But beneath the overwhelm, something gentle grew. A sense of belonging, a sense of contribution. One afternoon, as she sorted through messages related to her exhibit, she noticed an envelope slipped under her door. No return address, no stamp, just her name written in small, careful handwriting. She almost ignored it. Anonymous letters had once meant danger. She had learned to protect herself from anything unknown, but something about the handwriting stopped her. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't rushed. It looked shaky, as if the writer had been scared while holding the pen. Maya opened it slowly, Inside was a single sheet of paper. No introduction, no signature, just a message written in dark ink. I don't know how to say this. I worked with Travis years ago. He hurt me too. Maya froze. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the next line. I thought no one would ever believe me. Maya sat down slowly, the letter trembling in her hands. The handwriting grew uneven toward the bottom, as if the writer had rushed through the final words before losing courage. I tried to report him once. No one listened. They said I misunderstood. They said he was too important to upset. When your story appeared online, I finally felt seen. Maya read the paragraph again, her pulse tight and unsteady. She had always known Travis carried cruelty like a second skin. She knew her own scars were not the first he had created, but seeing proof in someone else's handwriting made her chest ache. She thought of the lives he had touched with that same manipulation, the other voices he had silenced, the other dreams he had crushed. At the bottom of the page, the intern added one last line. Thank you for speaking when I couldn't. I'm ready to come forward now. Maya pressed the letter against her chest, overwhelmed by a rush of emotion that felt too large for the small room around her. Relief stirred with sorrow. Strength mingled with grief. She hadn't expected to become a lifeline for someone she'd never met. She hadn't expected to feel the weight of their trust, but she understood it, in ways she wished she didn't. She called Keanu. He answered on the second ring, his tone warm and steady, the way it always was when he sensed she needed support. She read the letter aloud, her voice shaking despite her efforts to stay composed. When she finished, there was a long, thoughtful silence on the other end of the line. Then Keanu spoke softly. This is exactly why your story mattered. You gave someone else the courage to stand up. You didn't just change your own life, you're helping change theirs. Maya felt tears gather at the corners of her eyes. I'm scared for her, she admitted. Whoever she is, I know what it's like to think no one will believe you. That's why she wrote to you, Keanu said. Because she knows you'll understand, and because she knows she's not alone anymore. He offered to connect her with his legal team, reassuring her that they would treat the letter writer with the utmost privacy and care. Maya agreed. She didn't want another woman to face what she had faced. Not in silence, not in fear, not with doors closed around her. In the days that followed, word of more reforms began to swirl through the industry. Studios announced internal audits. Big-name actors publicly endorsed assistant protection initiatives. A few directors known for harsh temperaments suddenly changed their tone at work. And it wasn't perfect. No industry transformed itself in a week. But the shift was undeniable. Maya watched all of it unfold with a sense of quiet awe. She'd left behind a life defined by survival and fear. Now she was witnessing something she never dared dream possible. A ripple she hadn't intended to make. A wave she never expected to start. And somewhere out there, an intern who once believed she had no voice was preparing to speak. Because Maya had spoken first. Because courage once shared rarely stops with one person. Because the silence was finally breaking. 1 year passed, though for Maya, it sometimes felt like a lifetime. The woman she was 12 months ago, the one who hid bruises under fabric, who walked on eggshells, who apologized for taking up space, felt like a shadow she'd finally stepped away from. She still remembered that version of herself with compassion, but not with fear. Not anymore. Her apartment looked different now. Plants flourished on the windowsill. Art supplies sat neatly on her shelves. The open-door poster that had gone viral hung framed in her living room, a quiet reminder of how far she'd come. And on her desk sat a framed photo from her first exhibit. In it, her smile was genuine, bright, and completely unforced. But the biggest change lived inside her. She had launched her design initiative 6 months ago, beginning with a small team of volunteers who believed in creating safe, supportive spaces for people in creative fields. The early days were exhausting long hours and constant planning, but they had been hers to shape. And slowly the initiative grew. First 3 clients, then 12, then a partnership with a local college. now a dedicated studio space, with a waiting list of organizations wanting her materials. She never thought she would be leading anything, but here she was guiding a group dedicated to protecting people from the very darkness she once escaped. Her personal life had grown too. She was dating again, carefully, slowly. Her partner Alex worked as a community educator and understood trauma without trying to fix her. He asked permission before touching her shoulder. He listened without trying to guide her decisions. And most importantly, he made her feel safe, not because he hovered or protected her, but because he respected her boundaries in a way that felt steady and sincere. They weren't rushing anything. She didn't need perfect. She needed peace, and he brought her that. Every few weeks, she still heard from Keanu. He checked in sometimes with a voicemail that simply said he hoped she was well, sometimes with a book he thought she'd enjoy, wrapped in simple paper with a handwritten note. Thought this might inspire you. This one helped me once. Proud of everything you're building. He never intruded, never asked for details unless she offered them. But he stayed present in the quiet, reliable way that true support often shows itself. She knew she could call him if she needed to, and she did sometimes. Not because she was in danger anymore, but because talking to him reminded her of the moment someone first believed her, the moment someone noticed what others ignored. He attended another small exhibit of hers just as before. No entourage, no press. He walked through the gallery with his hands in his pockets, studying every piece with thoughtful eyes. Afterward, he hugged her and told her the colors in her work felt lighter this time. She smiled and told him she felt lighter too. Through all of this, the world kept shifting. Her organization quietly helped dozens of women and several men escape dangerous situations without publicity. Sometimes the work was heartbreaking. Sometimes it was complicated. But every time someone reached out saying they needed help, Maya and her team responded with care, compassion, and the promise that no one would face what she did alone. The impact of her organization grew in ways she never expected. A woman from a film school reached out, saying one of Maya's posters had given her the courage to leave a controlling partner. A young assistant wrote to say that after hearing about the Open Door initiative, she finally reported a producer who had threatened her career. And in one case, a costume designer credited Maya's safety toolkit with helping her recognize the warning signs in a coworker's relationship before things escalated. Every message reminded Maya why she kept going even on the long nights when exhaustion crept in. She wasn't trying to change the entire world. She was trying to change one person's world at a time. And somehow, that was enough. Keanu continued supporting from the sidelines, never drawing attention to himself. When a studio implemented new assistant protection measures, he donated anonymously to fund their training program. When Maya's group offered crisis stipends, he quietly matched their budget. He didn't want praise, and Maya respected that deeply. She often wondered how many lives were improving because of his invisible efforts. One afternoon, Keanu agreed to a short interview with a respected journalist known for avoiding sensationalism. The segment focused on workplace safety and the creative community's responsibility. Maya didn't watch it live. She wasn't ready to hear her story reflected through the lens of someone else's questions. But later that night, Alex gently encouraged her to sit with him and play the recorded clip. Keanu appeared on screen, looking thoughtful, hands folded, speaking with the same calm sincerity she remembered from the worst and best moments of her past year. The interviewer asked why he had become so involved in advocating for emotional safety, why he had helped fund programs that no one even knew he was connected to. Keanu paused for a moment as if weighing how much he wanted to reveal. Then he said something that hit Maya like a quiet, powerful wave. Because someone noticed me once too, and I've never forgotten. The interviewer didn't press further. They didn't need to. The depth of his words carried more than any detailed story ever could. Maya felt her throat tighten as she listened. She knew he wasn't talking about fame or success. He was talking about pain, about vulnerability, about a moment in his past that changed him the same way her journey had changed her. Alex put a reassuring hand on her back, reminding her she wasn't alone while she absorbed the weight of Keanu's truth. She realized that he had never helped her from a place of pity. He had helped her from a place of understanding. As the screen faded to black, Maya felt something shift inside her again. She had spent so long trying to reclaim her voice, her power, her future. But now, watching Keanu speak with such quiet honesty, she understood something deeper. Healing wasn't only about surviving what happened. It was about becoming the kind of person who could reach back and lift someone else into the light. And she had become exactly that. Maya had written many things over the past year: grant proposals, safety guides, design, concepts, quiet emails to women who reached out asking for help. But none of them felt as heavy or as intimate as the letter she now began. A letter to her younger self, the girl who once believed love meant endurance, silence, and shrinking small enough to avoid setting off a storm. She sat at her kitchen table with a warm light glowing above her, a pen resting between her fingers. For a long time, she didn't write anything. She thought about the bruises she once hid, the nights she spent pretending she was fine, the mornings she woke up hoping things would be different. She thought about the fear that lived inside her like a second heartbeat. Then she thought about the open door she had drawn, the exhibit she never imagined would happen, the people who found courage in her story, and the life she had now full of color, safety, and quiet confidence. She began to write. "Dear me," she wrote slowly, letting the words settle before continuing. "I know you're scared right now. I know you think everything is your fault. I know you replay every moment wondering what you could have done differently, but I need you to hear something important." She paused, feeling her throat tighten as memories pressed at her mind. She wrote anyway. "You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not responsible for someone else's cruelty." Her handwriting wavered as she continued, imagining the frightened version of herself sitting beside her listening. "You're going to hear things that make you doubt yourself. You're going to be blamed for things that were never your doing. And one day, you'll think leaving is impossible. You'll think you deserve the pain. But listen closely, you don't. You never did." The pen steadied as warmth spread through her chest. "There will be a moment, a single moment, when someone kind will quietly notice the hurt you're trying so hard to hide. They won't push you. They won't demand explanations. They'll simply remind you that you matter." She didn't write Keanu's name. She didn't need to. She knew the girl she was would recognize that type of kindness instantly, even if she had forgotten such kindness existed. "You'll walk through doors you once thought were locked. You'll draw again. You'll laugh again. You'll fall in love with the world again, even the parts that scared you. And you will help others find their way, too." Tears gathered in her eyes, but they weren't heavy like before. They felt cleansing, like something long overdue. "You will be hurt," she wrote carefully, "but you will not be broken. And one day, someone kind will remind you of who you are." When she put the pen down, she felt lighter. As if she had reached back in time to embrace the version of herself who once needed someone to tell her she was worth saving. Later that afternoon, she printed the letter on soft cream-colored paper and placed it inside a simple envelope. It wasn't meant for the public. It wasn't meant for her organization. It was something private, something sacred, a message of survival and grace. She wished she could deliver to every person who felt trapped in silence. She kept a copy for herself. One copy went into her journal, and one more, the original, she placed in a small wooden box, along with a few mementos she had saved from her journey. As she closed the lid, she whispered a quiet, "Thank you," not to any particular person, but to the universe for giving her the strength she once thought she lacked. Across town, at that same moment, Keanu sat alone on a quiet park bench, not filming, not preparing for an event, not surrounded by cameras. Just breathing the cool afternoon air, letting the weight of the past year settle around him. In his hands was a small envelope Maya had mailed earlier that week. He hadn't opened it yet. He wasn't sure why, maybe because he sensed it wasn't a casual thank you. It felt heavier, more intentional. and he wanted to read it when the world around him was quiet enough to hear every word. Finally, he opened it. Inside was a simple drawing on thick white paper, a key sketched in Maya's soft, careful style. Beneath it, one word written in clean, steady handwriting: freedom. Keanu stared at the drawing for a long time, not because he needed to understand it, but because he already did. Keanu let the card rest in his hands, tracing the outline of the drawn key with his thumb. It wasn't elaborate, it wasn't flashy, but there was something quietly powerful in its simplicity. A year ago, Maya could barely look anyone in the eye. Now she was sending symbols of liberation, drawn with her own steady hand. He exhaled slowly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for her transformation. He thought about the night he first noticed the bruise she tried to hide, the quiet fear in her eyes, the tremor in her voice when she insisted she was fine. He remembered the moment she finally told the truth, the moment she allowed herself to be seen, and how her voice shook, not from weakness, but from holding too much pain alone for too long. And now here she was, offering him a gift that felt less like a thank you and more like a declaration, a reminder that healing was not a straight path, a reminder that courage grows in small steps, a reminder that sometimes the only thing a person needs is for someone to notice. He closed the card and placed it carefully back into the envelope. A soft breeze passed through the park, rustling the leaves above him. Parents pushed strollers along the path. Runners passed by with earbuds in. Life carried on around him, unaware of the quiet moment unfolding on a wooden bench. Keanu slipped the envelope into the inner pocket of his jacket, not as a keepsake of what he had done, but as a reminder of what compassion could spark. He hoped Maya kept moving forward with the same strength she had shown these past months, lifting others as she climbed. As he stood to leave, he looked up at the sky, whispering a small wish that the world would keep opening its doors for people like her, and that someday those who still felt trapped would find their own key. In the quiet days that followed, Maya's life settled into something steady and meaningful. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't looking over her shoulder or jumping at every unfamiliar sound. Instead, she was building, creating, and offering others the one thing she had once needed so desperately: a lifeline in the dark. Her studio continued to grow. Her designs appeared in workplaces, studios, and small independent theaters across the country. The open-door symbol became recognizable among young interns and assistants, a quiet sign that said, safety was not a privilege reserved for the lucky. It was a right. And hope didn't need a spotlight to exist. Sometimes it lived in whispers, in folded letters, in a drawing slipped into an envelope. People began telling their own stories. Survivors who had stayed silent for years found their voices again. A coordinator from a television set wrote that she finally reported a production supervisor who had been controlling her for months. A makeup artist explained that Maya's essay helped her understand that the fear she felt at home wasn't normal. Someone else simply wrote that after reading her words, she felt less alone. These transformations didn't come with applause or headlines. They came quietly, one life at a time. And that was enough. Change didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived as a soft, steady shift in the way people saw themselves. Keanu watched all this from a respectful distance, feeling a warmth in his chest every time Maya shared good news. He never took credit, never wanted it. What mattered to him wasn't being thanked. It was knowing that one small act of noticing had grown into something far larger than either of them expected. He thought often about how many invisible battles people carried walking through everyday life, with calm faces, steady hands, and quiet voices, while hiding storms beneath the surface. He had seen it before, in friends, in colleagues, in strangers who didn't realize their pain was visible to anyone who looked closely enough. And now, because he chose to look, Maya's story had turned into a beacon for others. He reflected on the moment that changed everything, the day her sleeve slipped just enough to reveal a fading bruise. He could have looked away. He could have told himself it wasn't his place. He could have let the world move on while hers kept collapsing. But he didn't. One decision to care had set off a chain reaction. One act of kindness had expanded into a network of support. One voice that refused to stay silent had inspired dozens more to speak. He sat with that truth, often realizing that the smallest choices sometimes carried the largest consequences. The world didn't change through speeches or grand gestures alone. It changed when one person at the right moment decided to step forward instead of stepping back. And he hoped others watching Maya's journey felt empowered to step forward too. Because anyone could be the person who noticed. Anyone could be the person who listened. Anyone could be the one who made a difference when it mattered most. As months passed, Maya's story continued to ripple outward. She heard from professors who incorporated her essay into courses on workplace ethics. Assistants formed quiet support networks in studios across Los Angeles. Organizations reached out asking for her guidance on creating safe environments for young creatives. She often found herself stunned by how far her voice had carried, yet she never forgot that it all began with a single moment of compassion. Keanu saw the signs of change, too. Studios began rewriting their internal policies, advocacy groups received more calls than ever before, and conversations that people once avoided now found space in public forums, break rooms, and creative circles. The shift wasn't loud, but it was clear. What had once been an isolated story had become a thread woven into the broader fabric of accountability and empathy. He reminded himself often that healing wasn't a straight line. He knew some days were still difficult for Maya and others like her. Some mornings came with memories that lingered longer than they should. Some nights arrived with questions about what life might have been if fear hadn't taken hold for so long. But he also knew that healing didn't require perfection. It required progress, trust, and people willing to stand beside one another. From time to time, he walked past the park bench where he had read Maya's card. He kept the drawing tucked safely away, knowing its message would stay with him for the rest of his life. The key she sketched was more than a symbol of escape. It represented the possibility of choosing oneself again, even after the world tried to convince you otherwise. He hoped others would find their own key. He hoped someone watching this story unfold might be moved to pay closer attention to a friend, a coworker, a family member, or even a stranger who smiled a little too tightly or laughed a little too quickly. The signs were always there. They just needed someone willing to see them. As this story reaches its final moments, it offers a simple truth. Invisible battles surround us every day. Some people carry them quietly, believing no one will care or understand. But the power of noticing, of pausing long enough to ask if someone is truly all right, can alter the course of a life. Maya's story is a reminder of that. Keanu's choice to act is a reminder too. So, here are the closing questions offered to you now. Have you ever seen someone hiding behind a smile? What would you do if you noticed something wasn't right? If this story moved you, share it with someone. You never know who might hear exactly what they need at the exact moment they need it. And your share may be the reason someone finds the courage to reach out for help. And finally, as we continue building these stories together, what kind of journey should Keanu take on next? What challenge, what act of compassion, what moment of courage would you like to see him face? Let us know in the comments.